Greetings, outcasts, freethinkers, narrative questioners, dot connectors, and genuinely open-minded and outright curious inhabitants of whatever realm we exist in at the moment. You are about to embark on another free first-hour episode of
The Melt.
If you find yourself wanting to dig deeper and have the desire to join the conversation during our monthly Melt meetups, you might want to consider becoming a monthly subscriber. For as little as 3 lousy Babylon hokey-pokey tokens per month, you can have access to full-length, early, and exclusive episodes. Just visit patreon.com/themeltpodcast or click the link in the episode notes to set the process in motion. It's simple, painless, and very well might make you feel tingly inside. So without further ado, please enjoy the show!
This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
One of the most potentially divisive events to happen in the recent past was the death of George Floyd on the clock of the Minneapolis PD. His death set off a chain of events that have changed and charged the racial milieu of the United States. The question seems to be, was his death planned in order to set in motion a race war under the pretense of police brutality that was allegedly motivated by racism? Even though statistics regarding race and police brutality are skewed, and the only black lives that seem to matter are those that are taken at the hands of white police officers? There are so many things wrong with this picture that it begs further examination. But critical inquiry into any situation that involves any member of any oppressed class of people leads to accusations of bigotry and racism. This is a narrative that renders all that belong to the oppressor class, namely white men, as enforcers of some white supremacist system, regardless of the context or the underlying motivations, and which deifies all members of said oppressed groups as infallible saints that can never do wrong, nor can they ever hope to escape their state of perpetual victimhood. Can we see the plot holes in this narrative? So then George Floyd's death is turned into an iconic representation of this limiting narrative, irregardless of evidence that seems to point to Floyd having most likely died from a heart attack caused by the immense amount of drugs in his system, combined with the frenzy that he whipped himself into, hence indicated by claiming that he couldn't breathe long before he even exited his vehicle. What followed was widespread rioting and violence, possibly set into motion by agent provocateurs, and a worldwide campaign that BLM ended up making $90 million from, which never quite seemed to make it back to the black community. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Today's guest, documentarian and independent journalist Maryam Henein, has made a film chronicling the events of May 25, 2020, titled George Floyd, The Real Timeline, which she joins us today to talk about. I start off the conversation by asking Maryam how she got started in journalism.
It wasn't by choice, but initially. But I hail from Montreal, Canada. I graduated from Concordia as a journalist and also studied communications in Vancouver, and I minored in psychology. I psychoanalyze by default. It comes very naturally to me. And I realized that I didn't have a lot of opportunities as a journalist, and I chose to go to Los Angeles, California. And my first job was actually producing the news for MSNBC online. I was probably one of the first to produce the news for the internet. And from a very young age, have been on computers. My dad worked for IBM, that I now realize is tied to Tavistock, but it's also another story. And so I covered technology at, short little stint. And then I realized that my boss was getting paid twice as much as me. And also the way I was raised, seeing the news in Canada was, I was exposed to worldly news. And I quickly learned that they, spend so much money just for a chopper, $1 million during sweeps to get the drive-bys. And I recall going out on one story with a cameraman, and they were covering a drive-by. And so there was a journalist, and basically it was a couple in South Los Angeles, South Central, and it was their anniversary, and they were going to get some food, and they had their son, a 2-year-old, was on the father's shoulders, and a bullet killed him. So if he hadn't been on his father's shoulders, and then, so I'm at the scene, and it's like they're all mourning, and they have a picture of the boy, and I was like, I could never do that. I could never shove a microphone and ask, how are you feeling? I always covered more so features, and also interned at Discovery Channel, and I left NBC and I started pitching as a hustling freelancer. So I was writing for Maxim and LA Magazine, and I wrote several pieces for Penthouse for the unrepentant voyeur section. And all, 95% of the stories I wrote were ideas. They were my ideas that I pitched. And I used to go to New York and meet with the editors. And then I stepped into a crosswalk, and I was hit by an SUV and dragged 50 feet. And my life changed very much.
Holy shit.
I broke 6 bones, and I literally had to learn how to walk again. I had this titanium rod, a 13-inch titanium rod. Actually, I'm going to show it to you because I have it on my altar. I just found it recently so this, I don't think I've shown this. So this was in my femur.
Wow.
Holy shit.
And I could feel it, because I'm like Princess and the Pea. And because of the near-death experience, I realized I was an empath, and I don't talk about it much, but I'm clairaudient, and I feel things. So this near-death experience kind of put me on a different trajectory, and I was told that I would be in the health and wellness space. And I was like, what is this person, this astrologer? I went to get an astrology reading because this accident at the height of my Saturn, what they call your Saturn return. Yeah. So then I prayed to God to give my life meaning and to be in service, because I had lived, and then the bees flew into my life. And so I spent an afternoon looking at what the bees represent, and they represent the sacred feminine. And then I dedicated the next 5 years of my life traveling and making vanishing of the bees. And so I was still kind of part of the mainstream. I was doing, I appeared on a talk show with Ellen McCain's daughter. I remember, like, why are you a host? Move over, honey. For real. It's like, why am I bad on the eyes? Do I not know how to string a sentence together? I have a high EQ and IQ. So I wanted to, this was before content influencers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In any case, slowly, I think because I blew the whistle on Bayer, and during the making of the film, I was told to watch my tires by someone who now works for Bayer. He was the state entomologist for Florida, and then worked for Monsanto that became Bayer because they scrubbed the name.
Yep.
And so I really was opened my eyes to our adulterated food supply. And in reality, the accident was an initiation into real health and not health, HELLTH. Because I didn't have insurance as a Canadian, I really was to my own devices. I didn't even have physiotherapy. I used yoga to walk again, and my body exploded from the PTSD. So as early as 2006, I was already cutting out gluten, sugar, and really reforming my diet and just using every incident that's happened to me to learn further about health and wellness. And then at one point, I went and studied and got accreditation from the Institute of Functional Medicine. So I'm also a functional medicine coach and consultant and work with other doctors to get to the root of the issue. And today they're killing fields, the hospital.
Sure.
I was also covering medical freedom since 2012, covering vaccines. And for those of us who were covering medical freedom, we knew this pandemic was coming. And when the Rona hit, I was covering blow by blow, 365 days, 12 hours a day. Part of it, I was, alongside Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower. I encouraged him to come with me to the jungle. So I escaped to the jungle when this hit. We experienced maybe a week of fear porn, and then was like, peace out. This is a psyop. And of course, we arrived the same day as the Rona did in Costa Rica. So I got to see them do the same BS over there. Like, oh, now you're doing Snitch Nation. Now you're doing asymptomatic spread. It's the same crap. And whereas one person like my mom might say, but Miri, how could they lie to the whole world? For me, it's very easy to see how they could lie to the whole world.
Oh, yeah.
And that, prior to the Rona, I built a company into $1 million company called Honey Colony. And then I was attacked and targeted for being literally one of the first to sell CBD in the online space. And now everybody and their mother makes CBD, and they make crap CBD that's isolate and doesn't really respect the entourage effect or the fact that it's not liposomal. And when I say I was attacked, every processor under the sun shut us down. So that means was making $15,000 a week. And then I couldn't make anything for 2 weeks at a time. And so I had $1 million company that was getting 500,000 unique viewers. And we had to deal with being robbed and basically losing $250,000. And then there was the medic update by Google. And anybody that fell under your money or life was penalized. And so I lost the 500,000 unique visitors. And initially we thought we were doing something wrong. I remember going to a biohacking conference and seeing Mercola, and Mercola was addressing people to boycott Google. And I was the only one that went to talk to him to bring that up. And I told him that I call it techno-fascism, a term that now Jason Burmis uses almost every day in his broadcasts. But it wasn't popularized. And I'm the one who wrote about technofascism and censorship. I wrote a story interviewing Zach about how I discovered that Google was a drug company and that they were involved in the decade of vaccines. So shortly after the Rona hit. So it's been one thing after the other. And people would say, like, who are you? Why would you be targeted? You're not that big. Yeah, because someone's not allowing me to be big. Because I feel that if you're like, hey, I'm about to turn 50, I've been hit by an SUV, I've reversed lupus, which I didn't mention too after making Vanishing of the Bees. Ironically, I was sprayed by chemicals. They were fumigating between two buildings, and I couldn't go up a flight of stairs, and then learned that they told me I had lupus. It was really chemical body burden, and they gave me Cymbalta and prednisone, and they said, your body's attacking itself. There's no cure. Bye. And I said, F you, watch me. And I cured myself. Took 6 years. So again, like I said, everything that's occurred, I've used it as a opportunity to learn and dive deeper. But I've paid a price, like many of us now. It's become, normalized. And I was defending Roseanne Barr in 2018, and I said, Roseanne Barr today, you tomorrow. And here we are.
Exactly. So just chronologically,
yes.
When did you move to Los Angeles? Like, when did your story in the media world start?
I had just graduated journalism, and so I guess university 23, 24. I didn't even have a green card when I got my job as an intern at MSNBC, and then I worked my way up. Yeah.
That's absolutely phenomenal that you've been able to endure so much. It really says something about your character and
Hunter.
And just your ability to overcome adversity, because anywhere along that path you could have given up and you haven't. So I really admire that. And I think that courage is something that we've seen in this time, is that certain people have really risen to the occasion. And I think that's the necessary element of what you're doing, is just understanding that there are going to be people who may target you, but you have to stay the course. You have to just have this laser focus. And it really sounds like you do. I was very impressed by your film. I think the only thing I wish is that there would have been some chronological timeline somewhere in maybe the beginning, so that we could have kind of followed it along. But we watched.
You're talking about the George Floyd film?
Yes.
Not my B film. That's interesting, because I was telling Sean just the other day, how can we put a counter? And it's not, we can't put a counter because I have cutaways, but.
Right.
And I try my best to say it's 8:08, it's 7:46, it's
right.
So unfortunate. I mean, the time is there throughout. It's on the body or on camera. So I didn't know how to deal with that.
It would be cool if there could be some kind of a cron or something on the back or on the screen where you could show where it jumps from different times, where you just kind of put an arrow down.
I'm not jumping. I'm taking you through chronologically,
right.
And we start at 7:30, and I say 7:33.
Yep. And
then we end. So I understand what you're saying, but I think that person has to just keep track, because I don't know. I can't put a timer because it's but we highlight. I asked for a few more times to highlight the time.
Yes.
It's there in people's face. That's why I show the words.
Yep.
And I am very detailed, because I'm very detailed, and details matter in this mediocre age where nobody pays attention to them anymore. And that's why I've been able to produce something that nobody else has, because people are not, if they've chose to do this, they did it to perpetuate a bullshit lie.
Exactly.
there's nobody that's taken the time. I mean, Candace Owens' films, she presents a different angle, which is where the money with BLM as opposed to, and I want to say also, I'm writing a book, and this movie came out as a desire. I'm showing all the dialogue in the book, and this came out of me saying, okay, well, let me see for myself. And it's supposed to be highlighting the book and really accentuating, because there's a bazillion other bombshells that are not in the movie. But yes, I hear that. I hear what you're saying.
Well, I have 4 pages of questions for you because I went minute by minute as you did, and wrote just pedantic questions because we watched the Candace Owens film, and I respect the effort, but that film does
effort to gatekeep.
To be completely frank, her film does not hold a candle to your film. You go there, and you go there in such a way that it brought 4 pages worth of questions up, because it's so convoluted and confusing and intentional,
right?
And intentionally confusing the scene itself. That's how these psyops operate, is that no one knows exactly what the fuck is going on. And that's really what the intention is to keep someone who's just observing one angle focused on that angle while there's all these other things happening around.
Also specifically purposefully focused on Darnella's footage in order to cement the perception, and to bank on the emotional response of tapping into this collective wound, and believing that there's justice because of George. And so before you get into the question, just will tell you, in my investigations and many FOIA and 1,000 hours plus, I found a judgment order or a disallowance claim for someone claiming to be the natural father of George. This is one of bazillion things that I found. So I reached out to the attorney once, twice. And so yesterday I said, I've been commissioned to write a book. I worked for MSNBC. Like, I'm with you. I'm one of you, So she left me a message, and she said, I spoke to her, but she said, which I knew already, there's intellectual property. They've trademarked George Floyd's name. I called the dude who filed for the trademark, and I could tell that he didn't mean to pick up, but so he said it wasn't active. Meanwhile, there's an estate. So the attorney called me back, and she's the sole attorney. She says, but you've heard that, Crump has been in charge of the estate as well. And she said, it would be in your best interest if you didn't publish a book. So I said, oh, let me record that. Oh, I don't give you permission to record. I said, are you saying that in the United States of America, I am not allowed to write a book about George Perry Floyd? And she said, you're right. So I then called my publisher to warn them, because this is something I've been anticipating. How are they going to, what do they do with me and my voice? Is that they muffle me. That's the way in which, and I have resentment. I admit, to see these other content influencers that have bazillion followers, knowing, in journalism school, they teach you, use big numbers, 101 ways to get a man, specifically to bedazzle people when it's all bullshit. And I haven't gotten my Twitter account back, and I am a real journalist. And so I am like, it's like, what do I need to do? Until I read about Tavistock and I understand now you can't pierce the veil. And the people that you think, many of them that are on our side, so to speak, are not, like a Robert Malone, who's a controlled opposition. But that's, again, a different topic. So in any case, sorry, I sidetracked. But basically, I was told by an attorney that I'm not allowed to write a book.
Wow. That's insane.
Can you imagine that?
That his name is trademarked. I've never even heard of that. Yeah, that's nuts. Well, before we get into your questions, might I ask what it was that made you want to dive so headlong into the George Floyd case?
That's a very good question, because it definitely was not my intent. I was in the jungle and Zach said, Mimi, could you come and choke me? I'm like, what? So he asked me to do the George Floyd challenge, and I tentatively stepped on his neck. And I said, well, if you want to find out how he died, we have to call the medical examiner. So it's May 26th, and I called the medical examiner, and they said it will take weeks and weeks and weeks. 3 weeks, she said, at least. Multiple. She said weeks 3 times. Then hours later, CNN is dropping preliminary report. So I saw that as like, they're trying to sow discord. Then on May 27th or 28th, I interviewed Giovanni Thunstrom, who was George's other employer other than Maya. And I noticed talking points. I noticed things that for me and my intuition was like, there's talking points. I see things, and I saw a page with talking points. Like one of them was call the police on the police. Right. And making sure white, black. Oh, he was strangled because there was, if you remember, and I say it, the liquid that was coming out of the car, like, oh my God, did the guy pee on himself?
Yeah.
And so that was a red flag. And then I saw Bridget wearing I Can't Breathe on TMZ, like literally the next day. And I mean, I've said this in other interviews, like, oh, who gave you that shirt, honey? Is print shops, are they essential during a lockdown? So then I went and I did a search, not on Google. I used Quant, and I did I Can't Breathe, Benjamin Crump, George Floyd. And I was like, oh my God, Eric Garner said I Can't Breathe also 2014. Yeah. And he was also represented by Benjamin Crump. Let the games begin. Yeah. And I just didn't tap out, and I kept on covering it. And at one point near I think before the Derek Chauvin trial, which I covered extensively on Activist Post, that I'm like, why don't I write a book? I have all this information. And then as I was writing, I was doing FOIA and going deeper and deeper. And Zach would tease me and be like, you're obsessed, because I always want to talk about George Floyd. And along the way, I've interviewed for the book. I mean, you can access the interviews, but I've interviewed Joel Gilbert, who did the Trayvon Martin hoax. As part of my research. Like, my way of doing things is that I become obsessed, and I have looked under every rock, every crevice. And I did the timeline because chronology helps educate by looking at the time. But even reading redacted police reports, I could glean information. And so, for instance, just again, like, let's say the Twitter files, to cherry pick which journalists get it. No, dump the materials and allow people who see things that others don't see.
Exactly. To
report, instead of having these gatekeepers. I know I'm on a COVID list. I know the government. I know it. In the way in which they took me out, I know it. So yeah, that's what Chris got me into it. And when I told Joel So yeah, I was listing the people. I've interviewed Joel. I've interviewed a DEA investigator. I've interviewed someone who reports on the Mexican cartel. My book is going to be God, may I be safe. It's going to be so juicy. And I see myself as a scribe because they are vaporizing our history, and someone has to keep track. And it's very sad that there isn't more respect for journalists. And I will also share with you that a year ago, I don't know if you know that I was part of a 6-part smear job called Shadowland.
I've heard of it.
With NBC. And so they're interviewing people who believe in a shadow government. I read from my book. I showed them evidence that no one else has seen. I showed them my trailer. They cut out every instance of me saying George Floyd, but yet they're covering people who believe in conspiracy theories. What if they had just mentioned George Floyd once? What would that have done for my project? And so, that's the way they deal with me. That and I didn't know also that NBC, this was a co-production with The Atlantic, which is also CIA. They must have sent someone, and it's mortifying because they present me as an emotional woman that's after fame. And anybody that knows me, even not well, can tell, no, I just want credit for my fucking work, you motherfuckers. Excuse my language. So that's basically how I got into it. And then when I told Joel, my boyfriend's teasing me that I'm obsessed and I'm spending too much time, not really understanding that real investigations take a long time. Fortunately, it's not this McJustice bullshit that we see.
Right.
So Joel said, no one else is looking at the truth that makes you a fucking genius. So I've really held on to that because I am ready, very ready to move on, and I'm not done with my book. It's I showed the film to my roommate and he's like, wow, that's dark. And it's like, that's 1 hour of your life. I've been dealing with this. I'm a light being and I've been dealing with this for a year. I mean, I choose to more than a year. Yeah.
And how could it not be dark? I mean, it's the subject matter. It's intense shit.
Right. But even when I was living in Costa Rica, I was working all the time. Of course, I had the backdrop of nature. To me, that's where I can see God. And people be like, you really need to take a break, Maryam, and do, but I choose to do this. And it has played a toll. And that's why offsetting it with nature helps a lot. During all of this also, I've had to move and go to a completely different state after living in California for 23 years. And that also it's been very taxing. I mean, we've all been taxed under this Rona regime. It's all been purposely trauma. It's purposely been traumatic. That's the intent.
Absolutely. I feel that part of the whole intention is to continue to traumatize. And the timing of the Floyd issue happening was so perfectly timed because what was happening? People were locked in their houses. People are frustrated. People aren't able to work. Now you've got people who have maybe financial struggles and issues because they're not able to work remotely. So what a perfect time to time a race riot and create even more division. So as a psyop, it makes absolute sense that they did it the way that they did. But I just want to put a pin in something that you said. Chris and I don't have a massive audience. And what I continue to say to him is this: it's the right 1,000 people that are listening to us. It's the right 1,000 people who are engaged in this conversation. And so I really want to drive that point home to you. It's the right people that are getting your message. So ultimately, it doesn't matter if you have 200,000 Twitter followers. That is the propaganda machine that is selling this idea that that's what it means to be successful in this day and age. And that's not success.
I know that, but unless the sheeple or the other people don't know, they're bedazzled.
Yeah.
And it's one thing, they're taking away people from me.
Sure.
So I have footage of Twitter, refresh the page. Oh, 100 people gone, 100 people gone, 100 people gone. And also, it was this time last year, I had just escaped California. I was in Miami and I was on my own. I'm a dancer. I went to dance. It was New Year's Eve. There was someone doing a man on the street. I didn't know it was a well-known channel called Wait a Minute What? And I like, oh, are you doing a man on the street? I took the microphone and they later said I'm on something. I was on nothing. I was dancing. So I was high, and I said pandemic, which I contributed to the film, and sheeple and Chinafornia. And I said that I reversed lupus, and it went viral. 2 weeks later, I started getting hit up. And what did people want to know? How did you cure lupus? And so I went on Instagram and I did a live, and I had 4,000 people. And I'm like, this is the way it should be, folks. Right. Next day, let's ban Maryam. No more lives for Maryam. You know what? Let's make sure no one can even tag her. Yeah. And that video has gone viral twice.
Amazing.
So it's just like in life, it's hard enough to make it when you're a hard worker bee like I am. I'm not coming from money. I've worked really hard for my life. And so it's already hard enough. Then you stand and you target the person and you make sure they don't get further. That is, so yes, Hunter, you're absolutely right. It's the right people, whoever gets my message or sees it, but it's just unfortunate to not be given a fair chance. So I can see the fruits of my labor and see how I can excel. And I strive for excellence. I'm a perfectionist. Like I said earlier, I spit in the face of mediocrity. I won't stop. I've almost died many times, and I'm here. And I want to make my life count because I almost died. And I was told, my philosophy is know thyself and to be in service. I'm not driven by money. And I believe that life is sacred, and I'm very upset that they've replaced the sacred with Satan. That's the intent. So
exactly. But you're doing the work, and that's the most important thing. Fuck those people. Fuck the sheeple. I got to this place where I realized, there is no waking up anyone.
Right.
The only path is walking your path, because people will come into knowledge, they will come into information at their own pace and at their own rate. And the more that you try to wake someone up, the more entrenched they get in their reality. And so this is the magic, is just keeping on and doing what you're doing, because you're doing amazing work. Just know that. It's really, this is one of the types of interviews that I long for, because it's someone who walks the walk. It's not just selling some idea. These are the facts. This is what fucking happened, and you nailed it. You totally nailed it.
Thank you. I always, every day, feel like I'm not doing enough for myself. Like today, I still haven't written, and I don't know where that slave taskmaster. I was a friend, actually Vivian Kubrick, who's a dear friend, was looking at my chart and like, oh, now I see why you're so hard on yourself. And I am, and I'm not doing it. Like I'm showing up for me, for whatever reason, right? It's not because I want to kiss someone's ass, or like, I really want to do the best for myself. And in regards to this film, it's like, it is purposeful, very matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what are you going to dispute here? What are you going to dispute?
Exactly. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
At 7:33, we have, on May the 25th of 2020, we have Morris Lester Hall, the drug dealer, Shawanda Hill, Floyd's ex-girlfriend, a convicted felon who was convicted of forgery, and George Floyd entering into what looks like kind of a catch-all convenience store called Cup Foods.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I want to also say, I don't want to give too much because I do want people to go see it, but I'm happy. I mean, obviously I'm dropping details. But yes, go on. Sorry.
So at 7:46, there's a cigarette purchase that is made by Floyd where he tries to pass off a bill. There's some exchanges that are happening between he and Morris, where Morris comes and takes a bill out of George's open hand and then goes back outside. George's behavior is very erratic. We can confirm that, right? The interesting thing is that the people that were working in the store said that he looked drunk.
Yeah.
He was kind of potentially, no. I mean, to me, I've been around many people who are on drugs and on stimulants and also on antidepressants or on depressants. And he seems like he's kind of riding that line between being on something that's making him hyper, but also making him kind of like unstable, maybe would be the better word. What I found interesting about as the timeline progresses, 8:08 is when the police arrive. So there's been a little bit of a different timeline in Candace Owens' film. She says it takes 45 minutes for the police to arrive in her film. It
Really?
actually took, they called at 8:05, the police arrived at 8:08.
Right.
So
Yes, I mentioned that, and I mentioned it in my book. And I have the report, and I show everything in my book. I have receipts to show, but that is very interesting. I didn't catch that. I don't know how she phrased it.
She made it a point at the beginning of the film to say that it took 45 minutes for the police to arrive on the scene, which I thought was very interesting because you make a point that's an accurate point when you're going by the police
body cam footage,
where
and also the police report.
Okay, exactly. So that I found interesting.
That is very interesting. I'll have to go back and watch that because I don't even know. I mean, yeah, not to say I'm not going to crap on the film because I watched it. I enjoyed it, but she's a gatekeeper. Okay.
Right. Exactly. So one thing I thought was very interesting, a point that you brought up, is that Morris Lester Hall says, and I quote, "Adam know me." Do you believe that Hall was an informant for the police, that he and somehow Adam were colluding with the police, that this is part, like, is this the groundwork that you're laying by pointing that out? I mean, I know you're just putting out body cam footage, but is that the groundwork?
Well, I say that, well, actually, in my book, I detail, I suspected by watching the videos hundreds of times that Maurice was an informant, and I did a FOIA, and I was right. He was a informant. The thing is, for a hot minute, and snubbed the cops, but he was also arrested, so he didn't return. So initially, I thought that Maurice was scumbag that set up his friend.
Right.
And I didn't expect him to pick up the phone, and you can go and listen to my 2-hour exclusive interview.
I listened to that, yeah.
So, like Maurice just called me yesterday from jail and asked me to send him a Bible and a thesaurus, and I didn't plan to care for him, and I do. And my heart cries because in his story, you could see that they don't give a shit about Black lives, that this is all virtuing.
Yeah.
And why not give him a second chance? So it's ironic that they sentenced Alexander Kang last week, and they also sentenced Maurice on the same day. I had access to the Zoom link, and I was watching, and he actually handled himself very well. He's kept his cool in instances where I know I wouldn't. And he had an attorney speak on his behalf as well. And at the end, I unmuted myself, and the judge, you could tell in her she was full of guilt and doesn't give a crap about people, really. And I just unmuted and I said, you guys are all hypocrites. You made excuses for George Floyd's career criminal and addictions, and yet you won't give this Black man a second chance. And they shut down the entire Zoom call.
Wow.
They shut it down. Mimi court bombed the so, to answer your question, I mean, I don't want to spill the beans, but I do just bring attention to CUP. And in reality, George Floyd could have been an informant too. I'll just keep it at that.
So what happened with the arrest or at least the stop in 2019 when Floyd was stopped by the police and exhibited kind of similar behavior, wouldn't keep his hands still, looked like he was trying to ditch some drugs? What happened with that?
So imagine if they saw that and they said, you know what you did in 2019? You do it again, but you just keep saying, I can't breathe. And that at one point it becomes real. Yeah. And perhaps this PSYOP, like I say, wasn't supposed to result in a death. But in 2019, it's an undercover sting operation. And in fact, I just got the very redacted police report after 6 weeks of waiting, and I'm in the midst of reading it. So Scott Crichton, who I believe testified, and he was supposed to testify for the prosecution, and he comes in to talk about his testimony, and Steve Schleicher and Keith Ellison ask him, so what happened? And he's like, this was an undercover sting operation. They cut him off and they go, oh, you mean the traffic stop? And he's like, no, narcotics investigation. And, oh, you mean the traffic stop? So when they realized that Scott was not going to lie under oath, and why is the prosecution asking? So then Judge Peter Cahill, stated that they were only bringing up the 2019 case in order to show how it's dangerous to swallow drugs, not to establish that this is, is this his shtick? Because obviously he doesn't want to go back to jail. I understand that Maurice had outstanding warrants. I understand that you do shitty things when you're jonesing and trying to score drugs.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really have forgiveness, again, you could have given Maurice a second chance because he got clean. He did what the courts suggested. They promised him he was going to be a key witness, but it became very obvious that they eradicated the notion of this drug use and rewrote the script. And so they could not have Maurice. And then what? Maurice is going to go and testify for Derek? No, because also in these psyops, especially because there is racism and there is police brutality, that they can bank that people like Chris Martin, who took the 20, who I interviewed as well, and someone like Maurice do have experiences of racism. So they have a blind spot. And so he's not capable, Maurice, of seeing, like, you know, he wouldn't be able to understand what I'm going through. So, you know, to answer your question, regardless, they threw him under the bus. What was he, an informant for a hot minute? Yeah, he was. And again, was George. You know, when you realize that they don't care, and that really upsets me, because I know that truth has no color. And who are you guys telling me I'm a white supremacist racist? Fuck you. My mentor is Black. My operations manager is Black. Truth has no color. And I'm kind of brown. So, you know, I've had, let's say, in looking for an editor, and I see now that I could not have done this movie without Sean. And he's the one I was looking for. And I wasted a lot of time and a lot of money with people that weren't up to snuff. And it was late at night. I had just spent 6 months and $1,100 on an editor that gave me a version where he did not even sync my narration with my pictures, you know? And
ridiculous.
I asked him for the money back. And so it was late at night, and I you know how many nights I'd be like, please God, I need someone who is gifted, who knows how to edit, who is open-minded, and who knows this story, because I can't school them on, I'm in the inner bowels of George Floyd.
Yeah.
And I watched for the second time Psychological Operation by Sean Hibler. And I reached out to him and I told him this is what I can afford. And we've been working together. And just to tell the audience too, I still have a Give, Send, Go. I raised $1 million pretty much, you know, with doing fund like Indiegogo and Kickstarter. It was a different time. Yeah. For an award-winning film, and it's been 10 months, and I haven't even reached halfway mark of 15,000.
Wow.
For having the goods on a historic event, because even they've kiboshed on Give, Send, Go. There's been funny business. Yeah. The page has gone down. It's been 404'd after big shows. I've noticed that. And so I don't know if you have the Give, Send, Go, but I would love it if you're even $5. Every little bit helps to, you know, help me bring this film forward and cover the costs.
Yeah, we'll post the link for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. I do want to go back to 812. Floyd is against the wall as one of the officers questions him. The other officer is questioning Shawanda and Maurice. My question is this. Well, I have two questions about 812. First, why would they move George when they had him in a good spot? Isn't that kind of an interesting thing that they did? A. And B, why would they allow Shawanda to be making a phone call, calling her daughter to get a ride when there's a police investigation in the midst? I thought that was a little bit odd that the police officer didn't stop her from making a phone call and just kind of allowed her to be talking over him while he was trying to get information.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, she was on her Bluetooth, and I mean, it's not necessarily apparent that she's talking to her daughter to get a ride, but also, you know, Hunter, like they were both dismissed. If you notice, they ask Maurice for his ID initially, and it's interrupted And at one point, you can see George is looking to the other side, like trying to see what's the cue,
Yep.
you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's foiled. So he doesn't give. Then they ask him again, and Thomas Lane takes a fake ID, it's fake, and puts it in his notebook and forgets it. So those are little things I would have liked to have the time to be able to add to the film, but it was too much, which should be in the book. And also, not only did Thomas Lane forget to give Maurice his fake ID back, but he also leaves a crack pipe or a pipe on top of the car.
Mm-hmm.
And he also forgets that, which you could easily say, he's on his 5th day of the job. He's nervous. Also that I didn't only recently realize that Thomas is 6'7". He's taller than George.
Oh, wow.
I say that in the description of I think this movie is a movie you could see several times.
Absolutely.
Because you'll notice different things. As I learn every day, I learn something. Like, today I'm reading this 2019. I learn different details every day. A lot of it is weird. Even Charles McMillian, that's his real name, supposedly saying, I know you. I saw you 2 weeks ago to Derek.
Yep. So at 8:14, they stand him up and they start moving Floyd. Back to 8:12, another squad car arrives. Now we have no audio for calling for backup. So how does another squad car know to go to the scene unless one of those two officers has called for backup? I found that interesting.
It is in the police report that they asked for backup. And I'll tell you this also, that I say it briefly in the movie, Derek wasn't supposed to be working that day.
Right.
And so he comes into work, and this is also bizarro. The BCA, you could find it, of Tu Tao being interviewed by the BCA. It's on YouTube. And he tells him that Tao decided the dispatch got canceled. The backup got canceled. And then he says, let's go because they're rookies and they're in gangland. So when I was interviewing a woman who works against police brutality, she was like, that's funny. Everybody knows that the Bloods work with the police. Yeah. So to say we have to go there and you get to decide that you want. Let's take this ride.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I also say, like I mentioned that they come in less than 4 minutes,
which is insane.
The average. Oh yeah, sure. They could have been in the parameter. They could have been close by. Okay. But I know that when I got accosted on Hollywood Walk of Fame by 6'7" guy, I waited an hour and a half and had to peace out because nobody came. Nobody cared. Nobody cared. Let alone come for a forgery.
That's so insane. So one thing, just going to like the date and the time, why is the date different on the cop who's running the info? On his body cam, it says 5:26.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Right. Well, also, why is the Dragon Walk 24 minutes off? Yeah. When I go into that in the book as well. But, it's how are you going to confirm any of this? I tried to get the Peter Chang police report. There is no report for Park Police. And I say in the film, like, what? Now you have backup for a forgery? And as I've watched this 100 times, I say to myself, am I becoming desensitized, or is this becoming faker the more I watch it?
Yeah,
exactly. I could see that.
I also was curious why the police that were babysitting Hall and Hill didn't search the area.
because they were just babysitting them, keeping them.
Especially if there's some suspicion of drugs, the first thing you're going to do as a police officer, I mean, I'm not a police officer, but I've been around police investigations, like, living in New York for 10 years, living in Los Angeles for decades. Cops go around and look around. If they're suspicious of drugs or alcohol, they go and look around to see if they can find any drugs or alcohol.
Yeah. Also, think about they only found tablets in the car when they looked in the car like 6 months later. And the judge goes, that's incredible. What? Because, oh yeah, I was only assigned to look for bills you would never hear from again. And so my book is called A Multi-Layered PSYOP Examined. And when I covered the federal trial that got little fanfare of the 3 officers, and I have to say also, I'm physically not there. There's no live stream.
Right.
I'm reduced to having to rely on reporter notes, pool notes. So what I did was make sure that I had like 4 different reporters so that I can cross-reference. And then, of course, I have my context. So on one evening, I was in Miami. I called an NBC reporter, Lou Ragazzi, and he goes, "Oh, my boss told me I'm not allowed to speak to people like you." Oh, real journalists, you mean? What?
Oh, my God.
You're not allowed to speak to people like me?
Well, for the listeners out there, where can they find your work and where will they be able to watch the film when it's out?
Yes, thank you. You can buzz on over to Maryam Henein. I trust that you'll have the spelling of my name.
Yes.
It's maryamhenein.com. I have a weekly show called Truth Lives Here that's out on Rumble every Friday at 11. So tomorrow I'll be dropping an interview with George Webb, who's an investigative journalist, and if you want to support my abusive relationship with Twitter, I'm blady17. I still haven't gotten my account back. And for the movie, you can go and see the trailer at givesendgo.com/Maryam Henein, where I'm still raising funds and to pay for the footage and the editor and expenses of associated. And you can watch the movie. My Movies Plus will be offering the movie on January 15th. And people can also go to GeorgeFloydDocumentary.com. And my book is available pre-order at the moment. And that's what I need the most blessings for, because as I'm interviewing with you, I'm like, oh, fuck, I have to go and write. I have to write. I have like this, I want to finish this so much. So it's a lot of minutia but you can pre-order the book. And I hope to God that, in early spring, it'll be 2023. And I thank you both for taking the time to deep dive with me.
Absolutely.
For your observations and sensitivities.
For sure. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
God bless.
Yes.
It's
Thanks so much for
an
coming
honor
on.
to meet
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time.
And we'll let you know when this goes live.
Yes, I'll say one more thing, that
Sure.
my beats, like I said, are medical freedom. And I got offed off Twitter because of bringing attention to Charles Lieber, the nanotech king, and have talks about him. I was grateful to have an opportunity on the Clay Clark tour. And I will also be in Mexico, God willing, in February as part of, I'm going to butcher the name, Anarchapulco.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, amazing.
So I'll be speaking about how I reversed lupus and functional medicine, and people can use B Lady to buy a ticket and get 10% off, but I'm really excited to, I was very tentative to go to Mexico because of the Sinaloa cartel, but yeah, so I'll be there in February.
Cool. Fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much, Maryam.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll let you know when this comes out, and we'll
Yes,
probably
please.
converse in the future, I imagine.
Yes,
I
please,
hope
definitely.
so.
We want to read your book.
Yes.
Yes.
All
Great.
right. All
Well,
right.
Happy New Year to you. May
Likewise.
2023 be better for us.
Exactly.
Fucking men.
Yes.
All right. See you, Maryam.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Wild. This is why I love what we do. I really love speaking to brave, courageous, powerful forces of nature like Maryam. She is absolutely amazing. That was an incredible conversation, and I got to ask her all of the questions that I wanted to ask.
You did?
4 pages of questions I asked.
That was not 4 pages.
It was.
What?
It was. Front and back.
Wow. Amazing. Well, then kudos to you, too. Yes, fantastic movie. I cannot wait to see the book when it comes out. We should definitely pre-order that. Where did she say to do that? I guess we can just go back and listen.
I think her website is where she said.
I'll check my own links when I put in the episode notes.
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing stuff. I first heard her once again on Forbidden Knowledge News. And just at the very end of that interview, she brought up the George Floyd book and documentary. And I was like, wait, hold on a second. I want to know more about that. And that's when I contacted her, and that was a few months ago. So it finally is all come into play now. So, and I'm so glad that we got to see a screener of it.
Yeah, it's great. And, I know that some of our listeners, too, are incredibly empathetic people and very sensitive people. And, as I mentioned in the interview, I hadn't watched the Floyd footage until I saw the Candace Owens documentary. So I had never seen any of the footage. I just couldn't do it. And so to go into this documentary feeling very hesitant and feeling a lot of trepidation informed how I looked at it, because I didn't want to see it. And it's not because I didn't want to do any research for the interview. It's just because I didn't feel like I could fucking handle it. And she did such a brilliant job at being able to kind of keep this tone where it was almost like, just the facts, ma'am, kind of a tone. And I really needed that. It helped me to be able to look at it from a objective observer perspective. Because I'm going into a field where I'm going to have to deal with people who have all different types of trauma and who have experienced really horrifying things and, maybe have seen murders or been involved in things that I've never had any experience with. So it's important for me to be able to maintain my objectivity. And Maryam did an amazing job at being able to kind of just take a step back. It's not dramatized in any way, and there's no, scary music that's supposed to, punctuate certain moments to make you feel anything. It's just very straightforward.
Yeah. And Maryam goes a lot of crazy places like we do on the podcast as far as conspiracies and, just digging into aspects of public events that would lend themselves to conspiracy theory and stuff like that. But she left it out of this documentary, and I think that in the end will serve her, whereas it might make it more interesting for folk like us. It still was absolutely riveting, and I think it serves the historical purpose that it's meant to serve by just laying it out exactly how it is without trying to insert anything too outlandish to folk who don't generally entertain these sorts of things, and basically just tells it like it is. So I've learned a hell of a lot from it.
Yeah, I think that there's so many inconsistencies in the body cam footage, in the timeline, and being able to just lay that out in such a very simplified way is important, because it's a complicated story and there's so many different elements, and she's not filling in any blanks and telling you what to think or feel as you're observing it. And I think that is a really important thing to note, is that sometimes I think even in documentary films, the filmmaker's biases get in the way of the story. And in this, because this is such a highly charged subject, I think she handles it in such a way where she's not telling you what you should be thinking, but she's asking questions that, if you're paying attention, are the questions you should be asking too.
Yeah, and I think, excuse me, she mentioned being obsessed. I think motivation, being motivated by obsession can be a very, very good thing, and she's a perfect example of it. And I think it's necessary when you can't haphazardly put together a documentary like this. You have to, and I think many documentaries have made that mistake where there's plot holes, there's whole areas left unexamined.
Yeah.
And she was extremely thorough about that. And especially when you're trying to document or pour through the documentation that already exists of such a highly charged event that, I mean, Jesus, it's hard to quantify the effect that this had, not only on America, but on the world at large.
Yeah, and the stakes are high.
Yeah.
This is not, some walk in the park. This is something that is affecting her life and has clearly affected her career, and it's where she's putting so much of her energy. And so I think that it needs to be taken with that level of gravity and really appreciated for the time, the vigilance it took, and what a stickler she was for trying to make sure that she not only asked the emotional questions to people who were involved, but just even tried to reach those people. And if you and I hate to do this because people are different filmmakers and they have different agendas and different budgets and different ideas of what their focus should be when they're making a documentary. But if you kind of look just from a contextual standpoint at Candace Owens' documentary, and you look at Maryam's documentary, she really focuses on the events in such a specific detail, where I feel like Candace Owens was trying to kind of take people on this emotional journey, and it was more about following the money and where the money of Black Lives Matter went to, and she was kind of maybe painting with a broader brushstroke, where Maryam was focusing on the details. And in this particular story, the details are really germane to the outcome. So I'm not saying that the Black Lives Matter issue isn't important and isn't worthy of exploration. I think it is. I think there's a lot of value there. I think the corruption is rife and very obvious. But I think what she's focused on is what the fuck happened at this time, and why do these things not make sense? Why do these dots not connect?
And she's not trying to draw any conclusions necessarily. She may put forth an idea or two that she has about the whole thing afterwards, but she's not trying to say, and this isn't what happened, this is what happened. She's just going, what the fuck is all this about?
Yeah.
And like 9/11, obviously they're two completely different events, but just like 9/11, the media got a hold of the situation and went apeshit with it. And I think that was part of if this indeed is a psyop, that's the perfect stage. That may be what it's all for, is the media hype afterwards. Yeah. Just like 9/11. So once that media gets a hold of it and really concretizes the narrative, and we've all established who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, why they're bad guys, and why did this happen, then it becomes unexaminable after that, especially in the current cultural climate that we live in now, where race we're supposed to think it's so highly charged that we can't ever question anybody who's not white about anything. So it took a lot of bravery on her part to want to deep dive into this issue, but she did it with flying colors. It's really astounding.
Well, I think that the reason that the 9/11 psyop is a great comparison to a George Floyd psyop is that both are about bifurcating the country. Mm-hmm. It's about othering white people against black people, and at that point it was about othering white people against Middle Eastern people. And the intention behind that was then the government could swoop in, sign the Patriot Act, and basically say, well, we're doing this to protect the country. We're doing this because we want to be able to go into your house and take your hard drive and download or upload all the information from your hard drive, but we're doing it to protect you. We're stealing your data to protect you.
I think I would say the only difference between these two in that respect is that there came a point where communities were reaching out to Muslim communities within theirs and trying to build bridges, so on and so forth, after a fair deal amount of, pardon me, my head is kind of full of congestion, as you probably hear my voice. After a fair amount of flack from the general public, there was some bridge building that occurred, and I don't think that that's occurring in this situation, because this seems to have only solidified the black-white divide.
Well,
nobody's ever going to reach out to the white community.
I would disagree in that the reaching out has been that now you have the virtue signaling of putting a Black Lives Matter flag on your car, sticker on your car, or in your front yard, and that's somehow supposed to signal that
I'm guilty. I'm a guilty white person.
That you support the black community regardless. So if you're a black murderer, your life matters. If you're a black drug addict, your life matters. If you're a black child molester, your life matters.
If I was killed by another black,
if you're, life matter? Well, that doesn't count because now you're getting into some bigger issue there. So I think that's the thing that has been the olive branch that has been extended has been this kind of this fake version of the olive branch, which is basically a white person has to put a flag up in their yard that says, please don't think I'm a racist because I have this flag in my yard.
Exactly. Like the please don't think I'm a homophobic flags that we see around people's yards in particular neighborhoods where they just happen to be on almost every house. Because, once two people have them on your block, then you've got to just to make the record clear, you've got to put it up yourself. Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. If there were Muslim Lives Matter, I guess it's a different dynamic. That wouldn't have made sense in the context of 9/11. But yeah, point taken. That makes sense.
The whole thing is fucking ridiculous because all that type of signaling does is it signals to me, and of course, this is my opinion, it signals racism because what it's saying is your life matters more than someone else's life matters because you are now the protected class. So if you are black and your skin is black, that means that your life matters more than someone else's who doesn't look black. So where does someone like me fall into that category? Someone who's mixed race. So I'm not black enough, but I'm not white enough. So does my life not matter because I don't look like a black woman?
And it's racist because it's just categorizing you by the color of the arbitrary characteristics of the color of your skin, which nobody had any goddamn choice in. So it's stupid on that front alone. What was the point I was going to make? Please draw it out of the chasm of my mind. And I can't. I'm sure you've got another point to bring up.
The only point is this idea of spiral dynamics and the lowest form of human expression is tribalism.
And I think the question, I remember now what I was going to say, the question of is this or is this not a PSYOP? Okay, I can understand how somebody who doesn't look into this stuff would say that, if they would even consider it. But it certainly seems, even if this event wasn't a PSYOP, that everything that occurred after it was. It was a PSYOP in the instance of how it was taken advantage of to push agendas, and which lends credence to the fact that this indeed was a PSYOP. Also, the inconsistencies that were pointed out in the documentary, both the strongest ones, which were brought up during the conversation, which is the hand signal that the cop gave, and then all the bystanders flooded in. And what's the other one? The
timelines being off, like the body cam stuff not matching.
After the fact, supposedly George Floyd's son being prompted by this dude telling him what the narrative was, basically, that he was supposed to be speaking out loud.
Yeah. And a huge red flag for you all to consider, the point that Maryam made, is that the next day is when the federal mask mandate, and I want to follow up on that to confirm that. But the next day, the federal mask mandate was put in place. Now, why would that be important? Well, if you were going to go out and do some rioting, wouldn't it be great to have a mask on?
Exactly. And then as far as the riots are concerned, you got pallets of bricks delivered to all major cities where, surprisingly, just coincidentally, all these riots started happening. Old beat-up cop cars were left in these vicinities too. So many plot holes.
Yeah.
How couldn't, I mean, George Soros...
credit card. The George Soros Visa.
Yes.
I mean, it's so all deeply intrinsically linked. It truly is, and we know that you guys pick up on this shit.
Of course.
That we trust that you guys can follow the trail, and because it's so obvious.
Indeed. And on that note, I highly, and I'm sure Hunter does too, highly recommend that you do see this.
Please do.
Really important piece of work.
Please do.
And
buy Maryam's book.
Absolutely.
And please donate to her funds. She really needs the money, even if it was just $1, $5, whatever you can. Please help support her, because it's people like this. These are truly the warriors in this battle, and they need our love, our support, and even if you can't financially, just sending her good thoughts and blessings, that is its own currency, and she needs it.
Absolutely. All right. We've been almost going for 20 minutes.
Whoa. Wow. Wicked.
They're probably sick of hearing us now. Thank you all so very, very much for listening. Hopefully you got something positive out of that, if only that you should go see this movie and pre-order her book.
Yes.
And if you want to get a hold of us for suggestions for guests, casserole recipes, we're actually thinking about putting out a melt casserole recipe book.
Because we're kooks.
We're kooks. Praise, criticism, that can be sent to the Melt Podcast at protonmail.com.
And if you want to send us good vibes, I am working on our book proposal for Inner Traditions. If you have any suggestions, praise, criticism, thoughts, whatever you got, you can always email me at hunter-muse@protonmail.com.
And that's it. We love you very much.
Yes, we do.
Please keep listening. Fantastic stuff down the pike. And hopefully I will sound more human the next time you hear me.
Yeah.
Ta-ta!
To hear the full-length version of this episode, get access to exclusive and early episodes, and participate in our monthly Zoom meetups for as little as $3 per month, just click the Patreon link in the episode notes or visit patreon.com/themeltpodcast. Contributing financially will help to make this podcast my full-time gig that I can devote more time to and allow me to create more content. Other ways of contributing would be giving us a favorable review or rating wherever you get your podcasts, subscribing to us on YouTube, spreading the word wherever you and your tribe congregate, or just by sending us your positive thoughts and intentions. In a quantumly intertwined and holographic multiverse, these also go a long way. Thank you.